All right, appreciate you finding us on the podcast. We've got a great guest, a guy we get a couple times a year. It's always tough to navigate. He is a man of the streets this time of the year, all over the place. We're going to welcome back David Moulton. David is the host of the Miller and Moulton radio show, which is a syndicated show that he hosts every day. He's also part of the CBS broadcast team as far as the SEC game of the week on CBS, as well as the Monday night crew with Troy Aikman and Joe Buck on ESPN. So welcome back, David Moulton.
I am not hard to get a hold of. Come on now. All right.
I pick my spots to try to get you because I know you're a very busy man.
Well, I mean, that's nice of you, but we're all busy. Come on now. You know, when you call, I say yes.
You are great.
I'm like a late night booty call. I mean, when you call me, I say yes.
Sounds like you might have had some of those back in your younger days.
I was going to say, I'm be 57 at the end of the month. It's been a long time.
Oh, woo. Speaking of booty calls this weekend, how about Utah smacking that booty of USC and thwarting their chances of a playoff berth? And then what a game in Dallas with the Big 12 title game, TCU, Kansas State.
Let me ask you, you're watching that game on Saturday. When K-State's up 11, mid-fourth, is TCU in? At that moment, if I text you, 8 minutes to go in the game, it's 28-17 K-State. If I text you and said you have to vote right now, is TCU in, what would your vote have been?
That's a hell of a question because you're right. They were teetering on getting blown out in that game. One more bad possession, and it's 18, and then there's a major conversation to be had with that committee.
Well, I even wonder if it finishes at 11. Yeah, like, I'm wondering, you're like, wow.
Right.
Two score loss. It was basically a home game. I mean, it was played at Jarrah's place. They're not that far away.
Right.
There were far more TCU fans there than there were K-State. I mean, I don't know if they're in. I will say during the week, a consensus was forming that was kind of like, come on, TCU's in. The only question is whether or not it's going to be USC or Ohio State. It just seemed as if this was the year, Jason, that people didn't want to put this Alabama team in. They watched them all year. They saw the two losses, and they thought, Alabama's gotten some breaks along the way. This is not the team in the year to give them a break.
And that's the big debate with that committee. Do you take the best four teams who you think the best four are on paper, or do you think the best four deserving based on what that's the $1 million question with that committee?
Well, I hate that they put that word in. I mean, it's fitting that it's a 4-letter word because that's really what I think of it. And here's why, though. If we're going with the best, the eyeball test, who we think are the four best teams, well, then we're going to put basically four of the same 6 teams in every year.
Right.
A TCU's never going to get in. You're never going to say TCU is better than Alabama.
Right.
TCU is better than Ohio State.
Right.
So to me, when I hear best, I think best season. Who had the better season? To me, Jason, the games have to count, not the recruiting.
Right.
Not the rosters. The games have to really count.
And my debate would be Ohio State or Alabama is the 4 team. That, to me, that's my debate, not necessarily TCU. It's the Alabama-Ohio State debate for me. The 2-loss Alabama, you lose at the buzzer both times, but opposed to getting blown out in your building by 3 touchdowns.
And I will say a lot of people also had a bad taste in their mouth. If you remember, if the feeling after Michigan did what they did to Ohio State, for days last week, it was, well, Ohio State's not going to get in. We can't put Ohio State in. You can't lose by 3 touchdowns at home in your biggest game of the year and get a spot in the playoff. We can't reward somebody for backing in, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But then the minute USC got goat rodeoed Friday night, it's like, oh, damn, we're going to have to come up with somebody.
Yeah.
Jason, to me, I thought Nick in Alabama handled it all wrong. all
Okay.
wrong. I thought his appearance Saturday night on Fox was a bad one. And it shocked me because Alabama and Nick are such control freaks. And I can't believe that they couldn't, like a political party. When a political party, and they're going to send all their congressmen and women and senators out, and they're going to hammer home the same 4 bullet points.
Right.
These are our talking points. This
Right.
is our message. I can't believe, as USC is getting beat, that Alabama Saturday morning didn't have a Zoom meeting and didn't say, Nick, you're going to have to go on a couple shows and we need to come up with talking points because we're back in this. We're going to be in the discussion.
Sure.
It's just a matter of how much. And to me, their talking points should have been, our conference has 6 top 25 teams. The Big 10 and the Big 12 combined have 6 top 25 teams.
Right.
And so, yes, we have 2 losses and everyone else you're considering has 1. Well, if they were in our conference, they'd have at least 2 losses. Case in point, our 3rd place team in the East Division just knocked 2 teams out of the playoff.
Yeah.
Okay. South Carolina, by beating Tennessee, knocked Tennessee out. South Carolina, by beating Clemson, knocked Clemson out. And that's what Nick should have argued. Shouldn't have got into his quarterback getting hurt. Shouldn't have got into point spreads.
Right.
They did not have a message. He should have said TCU's had an excellent season. Ohio State's obviously always a very good team. Okay, if you want to go with them, there's nothing we can do. But look at our conference and look at our conference's track record. We've won 12 of the last 16 national championships.
Right.
Look at the first round of the draft. 12 to 16 of the players are going to come from our conference. You do have to acknowledge we are the best conference. Therefore, if you're going to have 2 teams from a conference this year, shouldn't it be from our conference? That should have been his argument, because every other argument they lose.
Right.
Best wins, losses, number of losses, the whole deal, they lose.
Right.
They should have just argued the big picture. And I still don't think they would have got in, but I think people would have given them a lot more credence.
A great point. That's a great point. You were in the building Saturday in Atlanta, LSU, Georgia. Obviously, most people thought Georgia would win comfortably. They did end up winning. The point I want to bring about this game, Georgia showed a little vulnerability in the pass game. LSU moved the ball not easily, but pretty consistently in the pass game with a quarterback that had a bum ankle, really bum ankle at a few times in that game that he was laboring big time. Does that give you any concern with Ohio State coming to town in that semifinal game with all the firepower they have for Kirby Smart?
Yeah. Yes. This is going back a ways, and sometimes we in the media do this. But one of the reasons why I didn't want the rematch in 2011 between LSU and Alabama, 2 historically great defenses in LSU, Alabama. The SEC was really down offensively that year. Half the quarterbacks got hurt. A lot of guys had graduated, the Julio Joneses of the world. I mean, it was just not a good year offensively.
Right.
And if they had put in Oklahoma State instead of Alabama, at least LSU would have had to play a wide open offense, a quarterback who could sling it, who would get drafted in the first couple rounds. They didn't have to face that during the year. Now, do I think LSU was bigger, stronger, deeper? Would they have won? I do. But do I think LSU would have, Oklahoma State would have scored 4 touchdowns? I do.
Right.
And that's kind of what I'm thinking here. Do I think Georgia's a little deeper, definitely more physical, and more multidimensional? Yes. They also have a first-round draft pick at quarterback and 2 first-round draft picks at wide receiver. That can be hard to stop. Remember SEC championship game last year. Alabama went in with Bryce Young and 2 healthy wide receivers, 2 first-round picks and a third-round pick. And what'd they do? They beat them.
Yep.
And last year's defense for Georgia is better than this year's defense.
Right.
So, if a football team can have a puncher's shot, I mean, Jason, did it catch your attention that Georgia's favored by less than a touchdown?
Yeah, right.
I mean, Vegas thinks Ohio State's got a puncher's chance.
You're right. Talk about Stetson Bennett a little bit. I know you've seen him several times in person the last couple of years. To me, he'll be the difference maker in this Ohio State game. He's just cool and calm at the big moments in these last couple of years, especially this year. He's got command of that offense. I like what Todd Monken does as an offensive coordinator.
Yes.
Scheming up those plays for these tight ends and such, and the creativity. Talk about Stetson Bennett and Todd Monken.
I do think Georgia has a coaching edge in this game from head coach and both their coordinators. I do. And I do think that will help them. Also, the experience of going through it last year, all of it. I do think that favors Georgia. And Georgia can get behind in this game and not freak out because of the way they play. Whereas I wonder if Ohio State gets behind, oh boy.
Right.
So, I mean, Jason, Georgia's playing a style of football that not many teams play anymore. I mean, this is like almost a Joe Gibbs offense from the 80s.
Yep.
Okay. Now, they don't necessarily have a Riggins, but they got the Hogs. They can go two tight end. I mean, their receivers may not be what they were last year, but Jason, those two tight ends are pro tight ends. I mean, Bowers is some combination of Kittle and Kelsey.
Yep.
On Saturday. I mean, you can't stop Kittle and Kelsey on Sunday. And the other guy is getting better every week because he's learning the position. He's 6'7", 260.
At least.
Right. And Bowers is 6'4", 230. And their blocking is they destroy the edges when they're both lined up together.
Right.
And then when they split them, it's a 7-man offensive line, both of whom could then go out and run a pass pattern. Georgia's just a really tough team to play. They're not as good as last year defensively.
Correct.
Ohio State needs to get off to a good start, and CJ and company. I went back to that SEC title game a year ago. Bryce Young threw it 44 times for over 400 yards. They only ran the ball 26 times. All right. They basically just said, listen, to run the ball on Georgia, you do it just to kill the clock.
Time. Right.
We're not going to gain a whole lot of yards. All right. Maybe we keep them honest occasionally, try to wear Jalen Carter out a little bit.
Yep.
But we're going to chuck the rock all over the place. This is our shot. We need to be gunslingers, and let's see what we do. And I think they'll be able to make some plays and score some points. I am worried about them defensively. I don't know if Ohio State keeps Georgia under 40.
Let's go to the other game, Michigan TCU. Kind of I think it's a good draw for Michigan. I mean, obviously, do you think they intentionally, under no circumstance, would pit Michigan against Ohio State? You think that was totally on purpose?
I think they wanted to avoid it. I think if TCU had gotten beat significantly, they would have been in a spot where, boy, how do we leapfrog Alabama over Ohio State and create Bama at 3 and Ohio State at 4? They would have had some real explaining to do.
Right.
Although I believe, Jason, that both commissioners would have been screaming publicly, but privately they would have been giving it the fist bump going, we're each guaranteed of a team in the title game.
Exactly.
But neither the fans wouldn't have wanted to see it. They'd rather see SEC against Big Ten. So as for TCU, they do have, for college, their quarterback is a gamer.
He is.
And, he's one of those guys, he ain't playing on Sundays. Okay. But he is a tough damn out on Saturdays. And they have a wide receiver. And I thought if you watch the Big Ten title game, Michigan didn't always look comfortable covering what Purdue was throwing at them.
Right.
Here's my problem, though. TCU wants to win running the ball, even if it's running the quarterback. It's difficult for me, Jason, to see somebody beating Michigan running the ball. I think maybe they stay in the game running the ball.
Right.
But they're going to have to ultimately beat them with their quarterback and their one really top wide receiver.
Yep.
That's where they got to make their plays, hopefully in a close game in the final 20 minutes. And maybe they do have a terrific kicker.
They do.
Okay. Who's made big kicks under pressure to win games. So, by the way, going back to that Big 12 title game, How was that third down play not reviewed?
I know. Right.
I mean, it's kind of a big play here. I mean, we're only
That's right.
talking about
I
A, a
know.
conference championship, and B, one of these two teams may play in the Natty. I mean, do we maybe want? I mean, I get the whole we don't want to stop the game and long delay. Yeah, but we got a lot on the line here. Could we
Right.
get this right?
Right.
Because I got to admit, he looked more in than short. And this is kind of a big deal here. I mean, you know, can only possibly play for the national title. We might, you know, there's a line in All the President's Men in which Jason Robards playing Ben Bradley, you know, says to Woodward and Bernstein, you know, we've only got the future of the country and the Constitution, okay, and freedom of press, and your career's on the line. So I really hope we get this right.
Yeah, right.
You know, that's kind of what I felt there, that I wanted to say, whoa, can we take
At least
5 minutes?
Yeah,
if we
right.
have to, order a Starbucks, look at this, and get this right.
You're right. No, I was surprised. You're right. That's a great point. That's a great point. All right. Any of these college football hires surprise you? You obviously got Deion going to Colorado. You got down your neck of the woods, Tom Herman coming to FAU. You got today, you had breaking news. The Louisville coach leaves for Cincinnati.
Well, the reason he left is they've been talking about getting rid of him for 2 years. So you might as well leave before they come and get you.
Exactly.
I mean, they've been for 2 years saying they want Jeff Brom at Purdue to come back to Louisville. So if you're Satterfield, you wait for the first good offer and you get them out.
And now Louisville has a reason to go get Brom because he won a title at Purdue.
Right. And if you're Brom, you're like, well, I ain't playing in the Big Ten title game ever again. I might as well go to the ACC.
Right. No
doubt. A lot easier there.
Any of those moves, the Deion move, obviously, were you surprised he took that job as opposed to other offers he probably had?
A little bit. The early word that I had gotten about Deion was Colorado, by the way, was in on him immediately. They wanted Deion. There was not a school out there, even South Florida, did not want Deion to the level that Colorado did.
Okay.
So, I mean, so Deion's getting a blank piece of paper and a pen in terms of the recruits he can get in, transfers, the whole deal. I was told that Deion was a little leery about, could I, A, get the players that I need, but also B, are you sure we can win out here? You know what? But once Colorado convinced him of that, then obviously it became a Power 5 school against South Florida.
Right.
I thought it would have been, if I was Deion, I got to be honest, I would have taken the South Florida gig because I think I would have come in and I would have crushed it.
Yes.
I think in 2 years, he would have pulled what they did at UCF and thrown an undefeated season on the board, made the playoff. And then, quite frankly,
he'd have been gone somewhere else. He'd have been the SEC.
Here's the deal. Also, if Deion has success at Colorado, and by the way, 8-4, 9-3 is success at Colorado.
Yes.
If you look at the last 20 years, I think Deion is setting himself up so that if Mike Norvell, who has turned Florida State around, but Florida State's never, in my opinion, going to give a coach $9-10 million a year. Correct. They will in the SEC and the Big Ten. So Mike Norvell, like, Florida State might be favored to win the ACC next year if the next 2 weeks in terms of recruiting and transfer portal go the way people think it is. And if Mike Norvell is going to bring Florida State back, he's going to get an offer from a school that you may not think is better, but the salary will be.
Correct.
And so he's going to have a tough decision to make. Do I stay at Florida State and make 6.5, or do I go somewhere and make 9.5?
Right.
And I think, Jason, what Deion may be doing, because Deion couldn't get the Florida State job 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I don't even know if he could have gotten it last year. Now you got Florida State people going, listen, we're loving this Mike Norvell thing. And if he ever leaves, we're calling Deion.
Yeah.
And we're bringing Prime home.
That's right.
And I think he'd come.
Oh, he would be on the first plane out of Denver as fast as you can go to Tallahassee.
He might make him come to then and grovel a little bit.
They would,
okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, there's some, but I think he'd be in Tallahassee for sure.
I agree wholeheartedly. All right, let's talk a little Army Navy. I know you get the pleasure of doing that game many years with CBS. talk about the pageantry of that game that maybe the average fan doesn't see on TV, of the emotion and just all the coolness that's associated with that game.
It is different, obviously, and difficult. You watch something on TV versus seeing it in person. Can the emotion transfer through the screen? But, and I'm guessing most everyone doesn't even know where CBS Sports Network is on their TV system. If you can find CBS Sports Network Saturday, find it by about noon. They do what's called the March On, in which both teams take 20 minutes and they march on and they march off and they march on and they march off. And I can tell you, Jason, live, and I've seen it now over 10 times, I tear up every time. Now, you know, my grandfather was in World War II. My dad was in the Army for a while. You know, that might have something to do with it. It's usually played in the Northeast. I grew up there. But I tear up during the March On every time. And if you don't even watch the game, although I do urge you, the game starts a little after 3:00. If you could tune in at about 10 to 3, we do a 4 to 5 minute open to the game, which gets nominated for Emmys every year and has won quite a few times. And that does bring me to tears. I mean, by the time Brad and Gary start talking, I am standing next to Gary and I have just tears all down my face when the men and women of the armed forces talk about what being in it means to them and then what this game means to them.
Right.
It's tough not to feel. I mean, you know, you thought you were patriotic during the U.S. men's national team, you know, Saturday against the Netherlands. You do Army Navy and talk to me about your level of patriotism. So that's the part, Jason, that if you never get to an Army Navy game, and the tickets are tough to come by, if you you can just watch, there is no game that has the pageantry before kickoff of this game.
No, you're right. It's a like I said, if you're a big sports fan, get it on your bucket list if you can try to make it one time in your life.
And Jason, they are going to move the game around a little bit. Next year it's in Boston, then it's in DC, then it's in Baltimore. You know, this game's almost always in Philadelphia.
Right.
There for the next handful of years, they're actually going to move it around. So maybe some of you can find, you know, your way to get your hands on some tickets. I don't think the game's ever been in Boston, by the way.
I don't
think about that. Think about that. The history of this country, you know, and Army Navy. And I don't think the game's ever been played in Boston, and it will be next year.
That'll be cool. That will be very cool. All right. Listen to David Moulton, host of Miller and Moulton on syndicated radio all over the state of Florida and such. David's based out of Fort Myers, Dion country down there. That's where Dion grew up, and obviously does plenty of work with CBS and ESPN. He's actually, we're talking to him today from his hotel room in Tampa, leading up to Monday Night Football tonight in Tampa. Let's get to the NFL a little bit. Interesting Sunday in the National Football League. A lot of things change with a couple of big injuries in Baltimore and San Francisco.
Well, at the time we're talking, I don't even know if we know the extent of Lamar's injury. They know he's going to miss some time. They don't think it's season ending. Even with Lamar, Jason, they were having trouble scoring points.
Big time.
For whatever reason. Now, I do think some of it was explained by Mark Andrews missing 3 games, because he's a top 3-4 tight end in the league also. And he's clearly Lamar's best weapon. And they've had injuries at running back seemingly for the last 2 years.
Wide receiver bad.
Right. But, you know, that whole offense is based around Lamar and his skill set.
Right.
I mean, unlike San Francisco, which it's just awful to lose not just your first, but your second string quarterback, and your second stringer is actually taking you to the Super Bowl.
Right.
But now you're down to the last guy picked in a draft. All right. A guy who's been cut, and then they're going to sign probably a guy they had on their practice squad 3 weeks ago back, and he's been cut by 3 organizations. I mean, that's going to be their quarterback room for the rest of the year.
Right.
And they've got a real chance to win a Super Bowl. Now, I will throw this out there. Apparently, Carolina is going to cut Baker Mayfield.
Wow.
And so you have to wonder then, if you're San Francisco.
Yes.
I mean, because if you're the Niners also last night, are you in the room going, do we have to call a retired quarterback? Do we have to call Rivers? Do we have to call Breeze? Do we have to call Ryan Fitzpatrick and say, listen, put the
Right.
Thursday night thing on the sidelines. We got a chance to win a Super Bowl here. You never won a ring. I mean,
Wow.
but now, like I was wondering, could the Niners call up the Colts and say, listen, what are you keeping Nick Foles for? Okay, cut him. We'll make some bogus trade with you next year.
Throw
We'll
you a
give
fifth round pick.
Yeah, when we should have given you like $500 cash. Okay, and we'll make it up to you. But could you cut Nick Foles, please?
Yeah. Wow. That
Okay.
Baker Mayfield.
But now if Carolina cutting Baker Mayfield, if you're the Niners, I mean, obviously you're going to stay with Brock Purdy here for the next couple of days. He knows the system, the whole deal. But I mean, would you rather have Jacob Eason or Baker Mayfield as your backup quarterback?
Right. That's a great point. That would be, and he's capable enough. He ain't great, but he's capable enough to hand off and throw wide receiver screens and be competent.
Well, and also if you think about it, what the offense that he excelled in Cleveland was what? A play action fake off of a dominant running game offense.
Yes.
What is the Niners offense based off of? Play action fakes off dominant running game. It would fit. Stefanski and Shanahan's offenses have the same DNA. So I do think it would be a good fit for Baker.
No doubt. So the narratives of the NFC versus the AFC, to me, the NFC is top heavy. You got Philly, San Francisco, and Dallas are kind of the three clear better teams in that conference, where the AFC, you have some depth. You got 5 or 6 teams that you could probably make an argument could make a deep run. Is that how you see both conferences?
What I do find fascinating, and I don't necessarily agree with you, is what little regard we have for a 10-2 team. The Minnesota Vikings are 10-2.
Right.
And people talk about them like they're 5-7. I mean, it is remarkable what little regard we have for the Vikings. Now, they're definitely taking advantage of a very weak division this year. They won a lot of close games. Like yesterday, the Jets were in the red zone 6 times. The Vikings were in the red zone 3. Vikings went 3 for 3. The Jets went 1 for 6. Vikings win.
Right.
But I don't know what to tell you, Jason. Maybe this is their year. They've lost a lot of close games the last 2 years under Mike Zimmer. Maybe this is the year where they just rope a dope, but they win close games. Joe Burrow and the Bengals have figured out how to do that.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with you. Like, I don't think there's more than 4 teams that can go to the Super Bowl out of the NFC. And I think 4 is being generous with the Vikings. I do think, like right now, the Bengals are the 5 seed in the AFC. And the Dolphins are the 6. And let's be honest, if the Dolphins don't have to play in Orchard Park, the Dolphins can probably go toe-to-toe with just about everybody, including the Chiefs.
Yes.
I think the Dolphins could score with Kansas City. So
as bad as they played yesterday, they had the ball down 23-17 with a chance to take the lead in the fourth quarter.
Correct. And they played without both their offensive tackles against the Niners pass rush.
Right, exactly.
And the Dolphins are not healthy right now. They're missing 2 corners, they're missing 2 tackles. They have a lot of injuries right now. They have a very big game coming up Sunday against the Chargers, because unfortunately for the Dolphins, they're at Buffalo
the following week
on a short week, I think. And so all of a sudden 8-4 could be 8-6. Real quickly. It's the same thing, by the way, and I know, when this airs, this game will have already taken place, but the Bucks, if they lose tonight, they have the Niners and the Bengals on the back end.
Right.
They could be 5-9 in a heartbeat. I mean, and if you look at the scheduled game, like the Lions and the Raiders, you look at their schedules and you go, they've probably lost 1 too many games to make the playoffs.
Yep.
But they're not as far out of it as you think if you start looking at the schedule.
No doubt about it. Is Philly your favorite still in the NFC? Their balance on offense and then the reinforcements on defense with Sue and Linval Joseph. I think that's really going to help them moving forward. How do you see Philly and Dallas?
Well, I definitely love the Sue and Linval Joseph signings. Even the first game, Jason, that they played against the Colts, When those two were on the field, the Colts rushed with Jonathan Taylor for under 3 yards a carry. When those two were off the field, the Colts rushed for 6 yards a carry.
Right.
So, the one weakness that they have really on the team, they help solidify. Here's my question, Jason. So far during the regular season, the Cowboys, up until the fourth quarter last night, the Cowboys looked like a better team on the road than at home. They played much more structured, solidly on the road. They didn't try to be so fancy. Well, Dallas's road, barring them catching the Eagles, they're literally going to have to do what the Bucs did 2 years ago. They're going to have to win nothing but road games. Dallas hasn't won on the road in the playoffs since Aikman and the Cowboys went to Candlestick and beat the Niners 30 years ago. And if you look at Dak's road games in his young career,
not great.
Play all that well. Lost them all. Tony Romo never won on the road. Close games, might have got hosed by officials in Green Bay, but never, So to me, it's like, can Dallas win on the road in January? Dallas hasn't won on the road in January literally in 30 years.
Is OBJ going to get signed by Dallas? Is that a done deal?
Well, they have the most money. What I'm curious about, I think I think it's Dallas or the Giants. Dallas, because they're going to, recruit them better and sweet talk them more than anybody else. And they have the most money to offer this year. But I'm wondering if the Giants are willing to go multiple years, because their wide receiving core is arguably the worst in the league. So if you were the GM of the Giants, not only is the OBJ going to be able to help you next year, you ain't going to have 4 receivers better than him in 2024 either, most likely. So I think the Giants' ace in the hole is they can offer him a 3-year deal, prorated for this year, which would be very little money because they've got about $18 to spend, but they can offer him 2 years afterwards, and they can guarantee a good chunk of it because they got a lot of cap room coming up.
Right.
I think that's the ace in the Giants' hole. But what I think is, if you're Odell, do you go, I'll chase a ring in Buffalo or Dallas, and then I'll sign with the Giants in the offseason? Do I sign like a 2-month contract and then go be a free agent again?
And the thing is, he's refused to work out for anybody, so we don't even know if he's going to play. Is it going to be week 16, week 17, week 18? There's been no definitive timetable.
And remember, he tore the ACL in the Super Bowl, which was the first week of February. So it's only 10 months removed from his second ACL tear. He has allowed every team doctor, however, to give him a physical and all the medicals on his knee and what have you. But it is common, Jason. Very few guys will work out. They just say, no, you want to sign me, sign me.
All right, last question.
Legendary Art Monk did a workout for the Jets at the end of his career.
I remember hearing that. I do remember
did a workout.
Arthur Monk. Arthur.
All right. A Hall of Famer did a workout, and most everybody else is like, no, sign me.
All right, last thing, I'll get you out of here. Talk about the transition. You've gone from the Saturday, Sunday schedule of CBS and Fox to now Saturday, Monday night. Have you enjoyed that extra day, that little bit of extra time? Talk about that difference in travel and all the different things that go into doing those two jobs.
Well, and also Fox had Thursday nights for the last 4 years. So it was Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. I mean, it was 5 days on the road. This is obviously much better. Travel Friday, game Saturday, travel Sunday, game Monday, travel home. But I mean, Jason, come on. Can somebody like me complain? I mean, I've got the best seats in the house for arguably the best college games and for usually pretty good. Our schedule this year kind of, some teams that were supposed to be good kind of went south, so our schedule went with it. But I mean, Jason, I've told this to you before, this beat's working.
Are you guys doing the Sun Bowl this year? You guys still doing the Sun Bowl?
It's CBS's only bowl game.
That's hard to believe. The Sun Bowl is CBS's only bowl game. That really is.
They had the Gator Bowl and lost it like 10, 12 years ago. So they had a shot at the Cotton Bowl and lost the rights to that. But, the 4-letter networks gobbled up damn near every bowl game. Jason, something that is interesting is I think when they go to this 12-team playoff, that ESPN will own the rights to it because the contract they had with the committee went through the 25 season.
Okay.
But the talk in the college football world is they're going to try to open up the 12-team playoff to all the networks and create an NFL style playoff where, say, you have 4 quarterfinals.
Yeah.
Well, you could have 4 games on 4 different networks, just like we're used to in the NFL. They figure they'll get more
Drive up
money
the price a
that way.
little bit. Drive up the
Totally.
price.
Totally. And you'll find out that networks will probably pay $150 million for a standalone quarterfinal game.
Right.
Where CBS right now is paying $55 million for the entire season for the SEC.
And speaking of that, this is the last year of the contract. You own a Big Ten network, correct? Big Ten games next year, CBS?
Well, it's an interesting year next year for CBS because it's the first year of their Big Ten deal, but it's actually their last year of their SEC deal. Okay. So what you're going to have is at 3:30 most every Saturday, you're going to have an SEC game.
Okay.
There's only a couple weeks a year where CBS actually can't air an SEC game, like the first 2 weeks of the year. So then you'll get Big Ten games, and we might do maybe one primetime game the Friday after Thanksgiving. So what you'll probably see is about a half a dozen Big Ten games on CBS next year, and then the full SEC schedule. But yeah, we've got 1 year left of SEC games. The SEC has been on CBS for 30 years.
You're right. I remember. Yep. Vern. Yep.
Well, and before that, people forget Jim Nantz. He actually got his football play-by-play chops, if you will, doing the SEC. You know, the Peyton Manning and the Spurrier Gator games, a lot of them were with Jim Nantz.
That's right. No, I do. You're right. More, I think you're right. You are right. Well, David Moulton, great work, man. Keep it up. Awesome job with Nestler and Gary on Saturdays, and then Troy and Joe Mondays. And tonight, kind of a home game, is almost as home as you can get. Tampa to Fort Myers. So travel won't be too bad Tuesday, but keep up the great work. You guys do an awesome job, man, and appreciate the time.
Anytime, Jason. And if we don't talk in the next few weeks, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to everybody.
And don't be mentioning the booty calls to the missus.
I'm going to make sure, and I know you want, I will retweet this and get it out there, but I will make sure she doesn't know and make sure she doesn't watch this unless she wants to be the booty call.
There you go.
So, maybe I'll, it's what Saturday night's for, Jason. Saturday night, otherwise known as Make It Happen night in the married world. So,
That's right. Have a great holiday, David, and have a great broadcast tonight.
All right, Jason, be good.
Thanks.